For several years, I've been using iPads for sheet music. Like countless musicians, they've become an indispensable part of my musical life. iPads are now standard on stage. When I go to concerts, now I see an iPad on a piano's music stand much more often than I see paper sheet music. Now, I've used a number of different models for reading scores and learning new pieces, from the most basic entry-level model all the way to the 12.9-inch M2 Pro. In this post, I'd like to answer common questions and share my latest observations and recommendations for musicians looking to supplement or even replace their paper sheet music with a tablet. Now first, which model iPad is best for sheet music? For reading music, the decision really just comes down to size. The largest model available as of this writing offers a screen that measures 12.9 inches diagonally. This model is the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. Now, the standard iPad size has been between about 10 and 11 inches for years. The base model grew half an inch to 10.2 inches, while the redesigned 10th generation model now has a 10.9-inch display, like the iPad Air. Then there's another Pro model with an 11-inch screen. Now, all of these mid-sized devices are suitable for holding pocket scores for occasional reference, but they're probably too small for most people to use them for learning music, unlike the large iPad Pro. And we could really forget the iPad mini for sheet music altogether. It's very practical for a lot of things, but the 8.3-inch screen is surely way too small for reading scores, save for very occasional reference. Is there really that much of a difference between the 11-inch and the 12.9-inch models when it comes to sheet music? Yes, a most emphatic yes. The 12.9-inch model was made to be exactly the size of a standard sheet of US letter paper. That's 8.5 by 11 inches, or 22 by 28 centimeters. Note that this holds for the device itself, including the 1 centimeter border around the screen. For learning music, rehearsing, and performing, the large screen really makes a night and day difference. The major downsides, though, are price, practicality, and portability. The 12.9-inch Pro starts at $300 more than the 11-inch Pro. It's $500 US more than the iPad Air with its 10.9-inch screen, and if you compare it to the redesigned 10th generation iPad, it's fully $650 more expensive. And that's not even the base model. That's a lot to pay if all you really need is a bigger screen. Now personally, I found that around 11 inches really is the sweet spot for a general purpose tablet. That's big enough for browsing the web, writing emails and documents, and messaging, yet small and light enough to fit into a briefcase or a shoulder bag without it weighing you down. I keep an 11-inch Pro handy, and it means my entire digital sheet music collection is always there whenever I need it on the go, which is surprisingly often. Whenever I reach for a tablet for checking my email or the news, I mostly grab the 11-inch model. But it's no substitute for the big screen if you only need it for the screen size, which is really all you need for music scores. Then I'd suggest checking Apple's refurbished store for discounted 12.9-inch Pros. That way you can get a current or previous generation model that's cosmetically flawless and has a full Apple guarantee and save money in the process. How much storage do you need for sheet music? Except for the Pros, the base models of all the iPads come with 64 gigabytes of storage as of 2023. Now, that's not all that much these days. It's plenty for most any sheet music collection, but it's better to have room for the apps and other data that you need. As of 2020, the iPad Pro models all start with at least 128 gigabytes of storage. This is actually quite a lot of space for most musicians. Now personally, I did want larger capacities just to have the extra storage, but I lucked out and I chanced upon the 128 gigabyte models of both the 11-inch M1 and the 12.9-inch M2 Pros really at huge discounts that I just couldn't pass up. Now with all the apps that I use and about 10 gigabytes of music scores, the system tells me that I'm still only using around 40 to 45 or 50 gigabytes of space altogether, so I still have plenty of room. Which processor do you need for sheet music? Apple has been making waves with its remarkably powerful and efficient M-series processors, the M1 and the M2 and all the variations of them. But the truth is that literally any iPad made in the last half dozen or so years is more than powerful enough for sheet music. I now use an M1 and M2 Pro, and to be honest, these things are stupidly fast. iPad OS is still too limited for true power users like software developers and video editors, even with Apple's recent release of Final Cut Pro for iPad, given its limitations. Now, for these applications, I use a desktop Mac. The big iPad Pro would really be my dream machine if only it ran macOS. Now, I'm just about to sell my 2018 iPad Pro, but right now I have this side by side with the new M2. Now, the older model from 2018 is half a millimeter thinner and just a tad lighter, but it's still actually noticeable. The thickness of the 12.9-inch M1 and M2 models was increased ever so slightly to accommodate the new display technology. Now, Apple calls this display XDR for extended dynamic range. It's really impressive while watching high dynamic range movies, but it doesn't make any difference at all for music applications. Now, the blacks are darker with this technology, but you really won't notice this in daylight or with the lights on or when practicing music. Now, personally, I do love the new screen, but like the other refinements to the Pro, the M2 processor, Face ID, the smooth 128 Hz refresh rate, which Apple calls ProMotion, it's ultimately a nice-to-have perk rather than something that will make an appreciable difference, at least for musicians. Do you need cellular? Personally, I found cellular indispensable on iPads, especially on the 11-inch model, which I can easily carry around while on the go. On the larger model, which I really just got for sheet music, it's not strictly necessary. My 2018 model didn't have it, but the new M2 does. It's only because that happened to be the model that was on sale. For me, this is a must-have on the standard-sized model and a nice-to-have on the larger one. What accessories do you need for sheet music? If you're going to use an iPad to learn scores, rehearse, and perform music, certain accessories are really indispensable. Now, first and foremost among them is the Apple Pencil. You might be wondering, is the Apple Pencil really necessary for musicians? Yes, definitely. If you're a musician and could only get one accessory for your iPad, I'd definitely get the Apple Pencil without hesitation. It really makes working with my favorite sheet music apps, Henley Library and Fourscore, very close to working with paper scores. So you can just annotate very easily here using the pencil. Graphic artists really appreciate the faster 120 Hz response rate of the iPad Pro screen with the Apple Pencil compared to the 60 Hz of the other models. I've used both versions of the Apple Pencil on different iPads, and to my eyes, it's really not a meaningful difference for taking notes or writing on musical scores. I probably honestly would not have noticed if I hadn't been looking for it, but then again, I'm not a visual artist. Now, that said, I do really appreciate the smoothness of the ProMotion display itself. Now, starting with the M2 models in 2022, the iPad Pro added a hover feature that shows a preview of the pencil's action before it actually touches the screen. Let me see if I could zoom in here. Now, I'm in the app Fourscore, and if I hover, if I start to come close to the screen, then I see a red dot, so right before the pencil actually touches the screen. And Fourscore added some gestures, so I can actually pinch out and make this nice and big. So now you should be able to see the red dot as a preview of what the pencil is actually going to do. And Fourscore added a few other features, it turns out. Like, so if you hover and then tap the screen, then you get a pop-up that gives you a menu of different pens and the like. And then if you hover and swipe to the left or swipe to the right, let me try this. I'll swipe to the left while hovering, and then I could undo, swipe to the right, and redo. So it's actually a pretty nice feature. That said, this is hardly a must-have feature. It's more of a nice-to-have feature, but it is useful, and it's important to note that many developers have not yet implemented any special support for hover. So I'm sure more developers will implement hover support as the feature gains in popularity. Now, you'll almost certainly need a Bluetooth page turner. These are really just keyboards with the keyboard shortcuts to simulate next page and previous page in the form of two foot pedals. Pianist Hugh Sung very early adopter of digital sheet music, inspired the market by founding the company AirTurn in 2008. They made the first hands-free page turners. I have one of their later models, the thin and light AirTurn Ped Pro, which fits easily into a bag. Yet for concerts, I like to use the Donner Bluetooth page turner pedal for its tactile feedback while turning pages. It's also easy to switch to different modes for use with different apps. The modes really just change the pedals to emulate different key presses, such as left and right arrows, or up and down arrows, page up and page down, and so on. Should you get a paper-like screen protector? You may have noticed another difference between these iPads if you have eagle eyes, and that is this one has a matte screen while the new one has a glossy screen. But actually, in reality, in terms of the hardware, both of them have glossy screens. I just put a matte screen protector on my older iPad. So this is meant to simulate the feel of paper. And this particular one is made by the company called Zag, but there are many other brands that make similar ones. So do I recommend it to musicians? It's really a judgment call. And you could hear the difference when writing on the screens. So this one really does feel and sound a lot more like paper. So again, this really is a judgment call. Personally, I have grown to like it, though it did take some getting used to. It definitely does what it says on the box. It makes your tablet feel a lot like paper. It's really wonderful for writing. Now, I found that the friction it adds actually helps me to position markings like fingerings in the Henley Library app a little more accurately, since my finger or the Apple Pencil doesn't slip. And when performing, there's another benefit. I've discovered that such screen protectors that simulate paper, they reduce glare compared to the glossy screen. And this means that you won't have to worry as much about spotlights making it hard to read your scores. Now, lighting on stage can be really unpredictable from one venue to another. Sometimes spotlights will hit at just the wrong angle, and that can interfere with reading the screen. Paper-like screen protectors mostly solve this problem, although not completely. It has happened to me in concert where I've had to adjust the angle of an iPad or request that the lighting be adjusted a little bit. Now, the paper-like screen protectors also significantly reduce fingerprints, so that's another benefit. Now still, I actually hesitate to get one for my new M2 iPad since it changes that beautiful XDR screen. The display appears not quite as sharp, and white backgrounds in particular show a little bit of a speckled effect. It's pretty subtle and makes the screen look like paper, so it does what it's supposed to do, and this is wonderful for music scores, though I'm not sure I want my iPad looking like that all the time. Nowadays, there are several easily removable paper-like screen protectors on the market. These clip on via magnets. Now, I've read that they don't fit with Apple's Magic Keyboard, so because the magnets are simply too thick. Now, what about the Magic Keyboard? Do you need that too? I think the Magic Keyboard is great. It may be stupidly expensive, especially here in Europe, but it really transforms the iPad into a viable laptop replacement for many tasks. I love the backlit keys. I don't miss the row of function keys, although I do wish it had an escape key. For musicians, it may not be strictly necessary, but it greatly expands the usefulness of the device. Now, the white keyboard can discolor, so it's worth getting a so-called skin. The skin also breathed new life into the larger keyboard that I have, which I've now had for several years. And now, thanks to the skin, it looks and feels brand new. So in conclusion, for sheet music, the larger 12.9-inch iPad Pro is unquestionably the one to get. Its other features are really overkill for most music applications when all most musicians need is the bigger screen. Sheet music apps don't require tons of RAM or a powerful processor. And what's more, literally any iPad made in the last half dozen or so years is plenty powerful for sheet music applications. So if your budget doesn't stretch to the expensive latest model, it's really worth taking a look at the used market and especially Apple's own refurbished store for other 12.9-inch iPad Pro models at an appreciable discount. Happy practicing.